In the hollowed halls of forgotten kingdoms, where the wind whispers through shattered stained-glass windows, lie tales that history tries to bury. These are not stories of triumph, but of ruin, not of love's victory, but of its devastating cost. This is the story of the kingdom of Eldoria, a realm of cold stone and colder hearts, ruled by a king forged in fire, a queen draped in sorrow, and a princess whose only crime was to love. The stones of this palace remember what the books have erased. They remember the scent of blood on velvet, the echo of a final scream in the royal chambers, and the unbearable silence that followed. We are taught that love conquers all, but history offers a much darker lesson. It teaches us that sometimes love is the very spark that ignites an inferno, consuming crowns, kingdoms, and the innocent souls caught in its blaze. This is the tragic tale of the princess who loved the wrong man, a love that brought a dynasty to its knees and left behind nothing but a ghost story told to frighten children from dreaming. King Thuron of Eldoria was not a man born to wear a crown. He was a man who ripped one from the cold head of his predecessor. His story began not in a gilded cradle, but on the blood-soaked battlefields of a bitter civil war. He was a second son, a forgotten lord with nothing but a sword in his hand and a fire in his eyes that burned with terrifying ambition. Thuron carved his path to the throne with steel and strategy, leaving a trail of broken alliances and fallen houses in his wake. He was a master of whispers and warfare, turning enemies against each other with poisoned words before finishing them with a loyal blade. When he finally seized the capital, he did not enter as a liberator but as a conqueror. The people feared him, the nobles despised him in secret, but no one dared challenge his authority. He had taught them that loyalty was rewarded, but betrayal, even a hint of it, was met with an agony that would make death seem a mercy. The king believed that power, absolute and unquestionable, was the only true legacy, the only real God in a world of chaos. To solidify his iron-fisted rule, King Thuron needed a queen, not for love but for legitimacy. His choice fell upon Lady Annalise, a woman from an old, respected lineage whose family he had all but destroyed. Her arrival was a spectacle of cold grandeur. She was breathtakingly beautiful, with eyes that held the deep, sad wisdom of a forgotten sea, but it was a beauty encased in ice. She was a political prisoner in a jeweled gown, her marriage a transaction written in the blood of her kin. The king paraded her as his treasured queen, a symbol of the unity he had forced upon the land. Annalise played her part with flawless grace, managing the royal household with a quiet dignity that earned her the people's silent admiration. She was the kingdom's conscience, a soft hand to soothe the wounds her husband inflicted. Yet, behind the silk curtains of her chambers, the queen was a woman trapped, her heart a frozen landscape of grief. She knew the king saw her not as a wife, but as the final piece in his collection of power, another beautiful object to be owned. Into this palace of cold ambition and silent sorrow, a flicker of light was born. Princess Orlia. Her birth was declared a miracle, a divine blessing upon King Thuron's reign. For a fleeting moment her cries seemed to chase the shadows from the castle's corners. She was innocence personified, a perfect fusion of her father's fierce eyes and her mother's gentle soul. To the king, she was the future of his dynasty, the ultimate proof of his legacy's endurance. To the queen, she was the only warmth in a life of perpetual winter, a reason to endure the gilded cage she called home. The kingdom celebrated for weeks, believing the princess would usher in an era of peace. They saw her as a symbol of hope, a flower blooming from blood-soaked soil. But in the dark world of Eldoria, hope was a dangerous illusion. Orlia was not just a daughter, she was a political asset, a pawn whose value would be measured in alliances and treaties. Her innocence was a fragile shield, destined to be shattered against the brutal reality of her father's world. As Princess Orlia grew, so did the darkness that coiled within the palace walls. King Thuron's court was a viper's nest of paranoia and suspicion. Every smile concealed a dagger, every compliment was a prelude to a demand. The king trusted no one, seeing potential traitors in every shadow. Spies moved like ghosts through the corridors, their whispers carrying tales of descent to the throne room, where punishments were swift and brutal. Envy festered among the nobility, who resented Thuron's iron grip and coveted his power. They saw the beautiful queen analyzed not as a ruler, but as a reminder of the old bloodline they believed should still be in power. The princess, sheltered from the worst of it, still felt the chill. She learned to read the silent language of the court, the averted eyes, the forced smiles, the sudden silences when she entered a room. The very air in the castle was thick with unspoken resentments and clandestine plots, a suffocating atmosphere where true loyalty was impossible to find, and survival depended on a perfect, emotionless mask. King Thuron's hunger was insatiable. The crown of Eldoria was not enough. He dreamed of an empire. His gaze turned to the neighboring kingdom of Viridia, a wealthy and ancient rival. He spoke of unification, of a grand destiny, but his words were a thin veil for his relentless greed. He bled his own kingdom dry, raising taxes to fund a war machine the likes of which the world had never seen. The forests were felled for siege engines, and the villages were emptied of young men to fill his armies. The queen watched in horror, her pleas for diplomacy and peace dismissed as feminine weakness. The king's ambition had become a raging fever, and he saw his daughter, Princess Orlia, not as a child to be cherished, but as his most valuable bargaining chip. He planned to marry her off to a powerful warlord in the north, securing an alliance that would allow him to crush Viridia without fear of an attack on his other flank. Her future, her happiness, her very life, were merely resources to be spent in his obsessive quest for more power. Queen Annalise was a ghost in her own home, a silent witness to the slow decay of the kingdom's soul. Her days were a performance of regal duty, but her nights were filled with unshed tears. She saw the fear in the eyes of her subjects and the growing darkness in her husband's. She walked the cold marble floors of the palace, her silk gown whispering against the stone, a lonely sound in the suffocating silence. The king no longer sought her counsel, his heart sealed off by paranoia and ambition. She became a prisoner of her own title, surrounded by ladies-in-waiting who were little more than the king's spies, reporting her every sigh, her every melancholic glance. Her only solace was her daughter, Princess Orlia, whom she tried to shield from the court's poison. The queen would tell her stories of a world beyond walls and politics, a world where love was not a currency and hearts were not weapons. But even as she spoke the words, she knew she was weaving a beautiful lie, a fragile fantasy that the king would one day tear apart without a second thought. Princess Orlia blossomed into a young woman of breathtaking grace, yet her spirit felt profoundly caged. She was taught statecraft, diplomacy, and the histories of royal bloodlines, but her education was a curriculum of entrapment. Every lesson was a reminder that she was not a person, but a symbol. Her life's path was a straight line drawn by her father, leading directly to a political marriage that would serve his military ambitions. The king would often watch her during state dinners, his eyes calculating her worth, assessing her beauty as one would a prize mare. Orlia yearned for something more than a life dictated by treaties. She would stand on the highest balcony of the castle, looking out towards the misty peaks of the rival kingdom, Viridia, and wonder if anyone there felt as trapped as she did. Her destiny felt like a gown that was too tight, slowly suffocating her. She was the jewel of the kingdom, but she was locked away in a box, her fate belonging not to herself, but to the cold, calculating ambition of the king. The breaking point came during a tense diplomatic summit, a last-ditch effort by Viridia to avoid the coming war. With the delegation came Prince Caelan, the heir to the Viridian throne. He was everything King Thuron was not: thoughtful, compassionate, with a quiet strength that did not rely on fear. He was, by birthright and allegiance, Princess Orlia's sworn enemy. And in the shadowed gardens of the palace, under the silent watch of ancient statues, they met. Their connection was immediate, a forbidden recognition of two souls trapped in the same gilded cage. Their secret meetings became Orlia's only escape, their hushed conversations the only truth in a life of lies. For the first time, She felt seen not as a princess or a political pawn, but as a woman. Theirs was a love born in the shadow of war, a desperate, impossible dream. The princess who was promised to a warlord had given her heart to the one man she could never have, the son of the king her father was sworn to destroy. This secret was a seed of rebellion, a beautiful, deadly flower that was about to bloom into chaos. A love like theirs could not remain hidden. A jealous courtier, seeking the king's favor, unveiled the secret. King Thuron's rage was not merely that of a father, it was the fury of a monarch betrayed. He saw Prince Kaelin's love not as romance, but as an act of espionage, a Viridian plot to corrupt his bloodline and steal his greatest asset. He imprisoned Princess Orlia in the highest tower, accusing her of high treason. He used her betrayal as the final pretext for the war he had always wanted, painting Viridia as a dishonorable kingdom of schemers. But his cruelty went too far. The story of the princess locked away for the crime of love spread through the kingdom. The people, already crushed by his war taxes, saw it as the final act of a tyrant. The nobles, who had long feared him, now saw an opportunity. The kingdom fractured. Rebellions ignited in the countryside. The war with Viridia began, but King Thuron now faced a second war from within his own borders. The throne, built on fear, began to crumble. Queen Annalise, seeing her daughter condemned and her kingdom erupting into flames, made one last, desperate attempt to reason with her husband. She went to the throne room, not as a queen, but as a mother, begging him to show mercy, to see the humanity in his own child. For her plea, the king saw only conspiracy. In his paranoid mind, the queen had known about the affair, had perhaps even orchestrated it as part of a plot to overthrow him. He stripped her of her title and guards, declaring her a traitor alongside her daughter. She was confined to her chambers, which became a cold, silent prison. There, abandoned by all, the queen finally succumbed to the despair that had haunted her for years. She was found one morning, lifeless in her bed, a single frozen tear on her cheek. The official cause was a sudden illness, but the whispers said it was a broken heart. Or perhaps a small, discreet vial of poison, a final, merciful escape from a life of unbearable sorrow. Her death was the true beginning of the end. The queen's death shattered the last vestiges of King Thuron's support. The army, now fighting a two-front war, lost its morale. The generals, disgusted by his cruelty, began to defect. The Viridian army, fueled by the story of their imprisoned prince and the martyred princess, fought with a righteous fury Thuron's conscripts could not match. The rebellion within Eldoria swelled, opening the castle gates for the invading forces. King Thuron was not captured on the battlefield, sword in hand, like the warrior he claimed to be. He was found hiding, alone and trembling in the dungeons beneath his own palace, trying to escape through a secret tunnel. He was dragged in chains before the victorious Viridian king and the leaders of the Eldorian rebellion. They did not grant him a swift execution. They paraded him through the streets of his own city, where the people who once feared him now threw stones and curses. He was executed at dawn, hung from the very battlements from which he once planned his conquests, his broken body a testament to an ambition that had devoured everything, including himself. And what of Princess Orlia, the catalyst for all this ruin? Her fate is the most tragic chapter of all. When the castle fell, she was freed from her tower, but she was not hailed as a victim. To the Viridians, she was the daughter of the tyrant who started the war. To her own people, she was the foolish girl whose forbidden love had brought destruction upon them all. She learned that Prince Kaelin, her secret love, had been killed in the final siege, struck down by an arrow fired from her own castle's walls. He had died trying to reach her. Now utterly alone, blamed by all sides, her heart shattered beyond repair, Princess Orlia became a ghost while still alive. She was not executed, nor was she imprisoned again. She was simply forgotten. One night, she walked out of the ruined palace and vanished into the mists of the surrounding forests. Some say she took her own life in the river. Others whisper that she still wanders the desolate woods, a sorrowful phantom forever searching for the ghost of the man she loved. a princess of a kingdom that no longer existed. Silence descended upon Eldoria. The kingdom, ravaged by 2 wars, collapsed. Its territories were absorbed by its neighbors, its name wiped from the maps. The grand palace of King Thuron was left to crumble, a colossal tombstone for a fallen dynasty. Ivy crawled over the throne where he had plotted his wars, and rain washed the bloodstains from the courtyard where he was executed. The tower where Princess Aurelia was imprisoned stood empty, a hollow monument to a love that was doomed from the start. The story of the king, the queen, and the princess became a cautionary tale, a dark legend whispered by grandmothers to warn against ambition and forbidden passion. The kingdom became a wasteland of memory, haunted by the echoes of what could have been. The fields lay fallow, the villages were deserted, and the once mighty castle became a home only to crows and the mournful wind, a permanent scar on the face of the earth, proving that thrones built on blood will always return to dust. The tragedy of Eldoria is not merely a story of a king's greed or a princess's forbidden love. It is a timeless lesson etched in stone and sorrow. It teaches us that in the brutal arithmetic of power, human hearts are often the first to be sacrificed. King Thuron sought an immortal legacy, but his ambition only earned him an unmarked grave. Queen Annalise sought to protect her child, but her silent suffering only ended in a lonely death. And Princess Aurelia, who sought only a moment of genuine connection in a life of cold duty, found that her love was not a key but a trigger. Her story reminds us that fate is not always kind and history is rarely just. The powerful write the records, but it is the silent, the broken, and the forgotten whose stories truly tell us the cost of a crown, the weight of a throne, and the terrible price of loving the wrong man. History bleeds, and its echoes are written in the cries of kings, queens, and lost princesses. This was the Fear Room. Don't forget to subscribe and like for more dark history tales.